In the serene town of Ashford, Virginia, known for its picturesque landscapes and tight-knit community, a dark and twisted story began to unfold in the autumn of 2023. What started as an unusual romance between a 21-year-old man and a 70-year-old woman would soon spiral into a chilling tale of manipulation, greed, and murder that would leave the town reeling. Eli Thompson was a young man with a quiet, introspective nature. Born and raised in Ashford, Eli was well known among the locals as the boy who always had his nose buried in a book. He had recently graduated from community college, unsure of what direction his life should take. His father had passed away when he was just a child, leaving his mother, Clara, to raise him on her own. They lived in a modest old farmhouse on the outskirts of town, struggling to make ends meet. Clara, a loving but overburdened woman, worked multiple jobs to support them, but the financial strain was ever present. Eli spent much of his time in the town's small library, where he could escape into the worlds of the novels he loved. It was here that he first met Rose Montgomery, a wealthy 70-year-old widow known for her eccentricities and her vast fortune. Rose, a former socialite who had moved to Ashford after the death of her fourth husband, was a striking figure in town. She was always impeccably dressed, with an air of authority that both intimidated and fascinated those around her. Despite their age difference, Rose and Eli began to form an unlikely friendship. Rose, drawn to Eli's youth and innocence, began inviting him over to her grand estate for long conversations over tea. Eli, feeling the weight of his responsibilities at home and desperate for an escape, found himself captivated by Rose's stories of a life filled with glamour and excitement. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened, and by the end of the summer, Eli shocked the town by announcing that he and Rose were engaged. The news spread through Ashford like wildfire. People couldn't understand why a young man like Eli would choose to marry someone old enough to be his grandmother. Some whispered that he was after her money, while others speculated that Rose was using him to stave off her loneliness. Regardless of the reason, the town was abuzz with gossip. The wedding was an extravagant affair, held in the garden of Rose's sprawling mansion. The event was lavish, with no expense spared, fine dining, live music, and floral arrangements that could rival those of a royal wedding. Eli, dressed in a tailored suit that made him look older than his years, seemed out of place. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with a nervous energy that didn't go unnoticed by the guests. Rose, on the other hand, was the epitome of confidence, beaming as she walked down the aisle in a designer gown. As the weeks passed after the wedding, it became apparent that not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Eli had moved into Rose's mansion, but he quickly found himself isolated from his old life. Rose's demands grew more intense, and she became increasingly controlling. Eli, once a free spirit, now spent most of his days confined to the mansion, cut off from his friends and family. Rose monitored his every move, making sure he adhered to her strict rules and expectations. Eli's mother, Clara, grew increasingly concerned. She hadn't seen her son in weeks and was troubled by the change in his behavior. When she tried to visit him, Rose would make excuses, saying Eli was busy or unwell. Clara's worries deepened, and she began to suspect that something was terribly wrong. One rainy evening in November, Eli managed to slip away from the mansion and made his way back to his childhood home. He arrived soaked and trembling, barely recognizable to his mother. Eli confided in Clara that he was trapped in a situation he didn't know how to escape. He described how Rose's behavior had become erratic, and how she had started giving him pills to help him relax. Eli suspected that Rose was drugging him to keep him compliant, but he felt powerless to resist. Clara, horrified by what she heard, urged Eli to leave Rose and come back home. But Eli, torn between his loyalty to his mother and his fear of Rose, was unsure of what to do. He agreed to stay with Clara for a few days to clear his mind and decide his next steps. However, before they could make any concrete plans, Rose appeared at their doorstep, demanding Eli return with her. Eli, caught in a state of confusion and fear, reluctantly complied. The next morning, Clara found a letter in her mailbox from an anonymous sender. The letter contained chilling details about Rose's past marriages. All of her previous husbands had died under mysterious circumstances, and Rose had inherited their fortunes. The letter warned Clara that Eli's life was in danger and that she needed to act quickly if she wanted to save him. Desperate and frightened, Clara took the letter to the local police. Detective Samuel Hayes, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for his tenacity, was assigned to the case. Hayes began looking into Rose's history and quickly uncovered a series of suspicious events surrounding the deaths of her former husbands. Each death had been ruled as natural causes or accidents, but the pattern was too consistent to ignore. As Hayes dug deeper, he discovered that Rose had a history of manipulating young, vulnerable men into relationships, only to discard them when they were no longer useful. Her wealth and social standing had always kept her out of trouble, but this time the evidence was starting to pile up against her. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Eli's situation was becoming increasingly dire. Rose had grown paranoid, fearing that Eli was planning to leave her. She began keeping him sedated with higher doses of the pills, ensuring that he was too disoriented to think clearly. Eli, aware that his time was running out, tried to reach out to his mother, but Rose had confiscated his phone and cut off all communication with the outside world. Detective Hayes, realizing the urgency of the situation, secured a warrant to search Rose's mansion. When the police arrived, they found Eli in a near catatonic state, heavily drugged and unable to stand on his own. Rose, maintaining her composure, claimed that Eli was unwell and that she had been taking care of him. However, the discovery of a hidden stash of prescription drugs in Rose's bedroom, drugs that matched those found in Eli's system, was enough to arrest her on suspicion of attempted murder. As the investigation continued, more damning evidence came to light. The letter Clara had received was traced back to a former housekeeper of Rose's, who had witnessed similar behavior in the past but had been too afraid to speak out. This witness provided crucial testimony about how Rose had manipulated her previous husbands, leading to their untimely deaths. With the case against her mounting, Rose finally broke down during an intense interrogation. She admitted to drugging Eli but insisted it was only to keep him calm and prevent him from leaving her. She denied any intention to kill him, claiming she was merely trying to protect their relationship. Rose Montgomery was charged with multiple counts, including attempted murder, fraud, and unlawful imprisonment. The trial, which began in early 2024, attracted national attention. The courtroom was packed with reporters and curious onlookers, all eager to hear the details of this bizarre and tragic case. The prosecution painted Rose as a manipulative predator who preyed on young men, using her wealth and influence to control them. They presented evidence of her past marriages, each ending in the suspicious death of her husbands, and argued that Eli had narrowly escaped the same fate. The defense, led by a high-profile attorney, attempted to portray Rose as a lonely, misunderstood woman who had simply fallen in love with a younger man. They claimed that Eli had willingly entered into the relationship, and that any drug use was consensual. However, the overwhelming evidence and the testimonies of those who had seen the darker side of Rose's character were too much to overcome. In the end, the jury found Rose guilty on all charges. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Eli, who had spent weeks in a hospital recovering from the physical and emotional trauma, eventually returned home to his mother. The experience had left him deeply scarred, but he was determined to rebuild his life, far away from the horrors he had endured. The town of Ashford, once again peaceful on the surface, remained haunted by the memory of what had transpired. The case served as a stark reminder of how easily darkness can hide behind a facade of wealth and respectability. For Eli and Clara, life would never be the same, but they found solace in the fact that justice had finally been served. As for Rose, she spent the rest of her days in a maximum security prison, isolated and forgotten, a far cry from the life of luxury and control she had once enjoyed. Her story became a cautionary tale in Ashford, a chilling example of how manipulation and greed can lead to unimaginable tragedy.